I'm Damien Fowler.
And I'm Eileen Lefring.
And welcome to this edition of The Current Podcast.
This week, we sit down with Kim Granito, the head of marketing at AMC Networks.
AMC Networks is a global entertainment company with a broad range of programming across its linear channels, which includes AMC, IFC, and the Sundance Channel, and its streaming platforms such as AMC+, Acorn TV, and Shudder.
The company is behind some of the most celebrated and acclaimed original content in this golden age of television. Everything from Mad Men to Breaking Bad to The Walking Dead. In short, it has built loyal and engaged fan communities.
Kim was promoted to head of marketing in April of this year. After more than a decade as a marketing leader at the company, Kim helped devise AMC Networks Content Room, a studio that allows brands and content creators to collaborate.
You know, we've written a lot about how streaming had a really large presence at Cannes this year, and I understand that it was your first time. How did you find the festival?
So this is our second year with boots on the ground at Cannes, and it was my first festival. And, you know, first impression, I was blown away by the wide array of brands and partners on ground. And it was really interesting to see a lot of the streaming brands toe step into this space. And I don't know that anyone completely nailed it, but it's definitely, I think, a space that's worth exploring and being at as streaming sort of continues to become more and more integrated.
I also wanted to say congratulations on your promotion, nearly 3 months. And I mean, really, you've been at AMC for more than 10 years at this point. But how does it feel?
It feels really good. I'm really excited about this job. On a personal level, for me, it's the culmination of a lot of different roles I've had in the past. I spent my entire career in entertainment marketing, from consumer promotions and events to media and strategy to most recently on the integrated marketing side. So to have all of those marketing functions in one place, it's like a marketer's dream. It's a real great creative playground to play in. And I think there's real advantage to companies that can show up with one voice across multiple audience touchpoints, whether that's consumers or partners or advertisers. And, you know, I think last week, great example of this, we just launched Dead City. It's a Walking Dead spinoff, New York City. We knew we wanted the city to be a backdrop. We did hordes of walkers throughout New York City, teamed up with iconic locations, Katz's Deli, bagel shops, hot dog spots. But Verizon, who's a big distribution partner for us, took place with it in their flagship store in Times Square. ServPro was the sponsor for the series, and they did custom content around it. So it's sort of, you know, rising tide lifts all boats, and I'm now in a seat where I could orchestrate a lot of that really easily. So it's kind of a dream.
I understand, too, that your background is largely rooted in creative and marketing strategy. So in addition to leading integrated marketing, you also created the widely successful Content Room, which is AMC's in-house branded entertainment and creative studio. How do you see these creative ad opportunities fusing with some of the other data-driven performance marketing initiatives for AMC?
You know, when we launched Content Room 3 years ago, the goal was to give our advertising partners full access to the massive fandoms we've amassed around these incredible IPs. And we felt it was really important to not just have another sort of in-house branded content studio. We wanted it to be really integrated. So within Content Room, we have a licensing team, a gaming team, e-commerce, and we also have a studio that produces, you know, over a dozen original series that grow out of our biggest IP. And what we found is that this content that we're creating for advertisers also becomes really meaningful consumer and audience content beats as well. So the studio that we have that is producing shows, I think a good example is we produced a show with Ray Seahorn from Better Call Saul. The show finale last year. She came to us with a passion project. She wanted to produce a slightly off hilarious comedy series called Cooper's Bar. Obviously, a bar has very easy endemic categories for advertisers who are like, yes, yes, yes. We premiered the show digital series between the 2 seasons of Better Call Saul. That audience was obsessed with her and her storyline. And the show did really well. And it's now actually coming back as a long form series at the end of the year. So I think by really tapping into what we're seeing from an audience performance standpoint around our content and bringing that to life in market for advertisers, we're creating stuff that isn't just another clip-based sort of advertising piece of creative. It's like real shows, which is exciting.
So AMC Networks has, a broad portfolio of different niche content, all sorts of genres. We talked about The Walking Dead, but beyond that, Mad Men, you've all sorts of incredible shows over the years. You also presumably can identify specific target audiences based across these different distinct genres. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that leads to, ad opportunities for advertisers?
We like to say that we're not something for everyone, we're everything to someone. And that has been our distinct positioning in market with advertisers and I think for consumers as well. We have the largest collection of targeted streaming services in the world. It sounds so crazy, but and that's a very different approach to what a lot of these big streaming companies are doing, which is everything for everyone in one place. So we have Acorn TV, which is home of international crimes and dramas for fans of that content. That offering goes really deep. All Black for Black voices and storytellers, Shudder for horror and supernatural fans. So it is a really interesting wide array of genres that we have to play with. And we're very deliberately programming and marketing to the audiences around those services. And we feel like that's a swim lane that is very distinct to us and allows us to be the cherry on top to the average streamer's, mix.
How would you say that targeting around genre can help marketers and advertisers?
I think it gives you a really clean space to play with, obviously from an audience standpoint. For us, we're able to leverage these genres beyond even what we're seeing on the streaming platforms because AMC Networks is a broad-based linear network and digital and has multiple digital streaming companies. We're able to sort of target those genres everywhere they live across our ecosystem and not just within the streamer itself.
At the same time, because you have all these distinct categories, different channels, how do you sort of think about telling a cohesive brand story for the AMC networks?
It's 2 stories. It's sort of us as a whole and us in parts. And the story in parts is like the fun one because you get to dive deep into the individual brands and really have fun. And then the larger sort of AMC network story, that's a B2B one. And that is ultimately comes down to super serving distinct audiences in a way that is highly engaging and resonates with them. And I think when you connect that back to just go back to Content Room for a minute, you can reach the Walking Dead audience on linear and on AMC Plus, and we'll have an original series that's produced with an advertiser that is also theirs to distribute across their whole ecosystem, our whole ecosystem. It is a nice sort of 360, I hate sort of marketing jargon like that, but it is a really great 360 multi-touch point campaign that has built-in success because we know what that audience wants and we're using data to inform what we're developing for them.
Do you see distinct demographics according to genre, or does it cut across?
Yeah, I think there's definitely distinct demographics by genre. I think, surprisingly, the Shudder audience skews more female than you would think. I think, on AMC Plus, it's pretty gender balanced and a little bit older. I think it really depends on who you're talking to. And, each show has a different audience too. So you can generalize the platform and the genre, but, each show sort of brings in its own mix of people as well.
For you, what are the kind of chief challenges? Because this is a space that's changing very quickly. How important is content and marketing to you? And how reactive do you have to be right now and at this current time?
We are really focused on our unique approach in market, which is everything to someone. We do think there are opportunities around bundling. We talked about Shudder a little bit, but AMC Plus is bundled with Shudder and Sundance Now and IFC Films because of the content synergies there. And we are obviously hyper-focused around the economics of our business. Shows on a lot of those targeted streamers cost significantly less than a Sunday night original on AMC. So we're able to scale the content that we deliver to those passion point audiences in a way that's meaningful enough to maintain engagement and keep them on the platform for long periods of time.
We talk about streaming being a fragmented space. At the same time, we're also watching consolidation. We recently saw, some big names move their content together. I won't necessarily name them, but, do you think AMC, is that something on the cards for AMC? How best to monetize, I guess, is the underlying theme.
We feel like we have a really defined lane that we're in, and we are very flexible and opportunistic with what we have across the portfolio. And I just mentioned this, but we bundle AMC Plus with Shudder and Sundance Now and IFC Films. But this is working for us really well, and it feels distinct and special. So, we feel pretty good about our positioning in market.
Along with consolidation, there's just been a lot of change over time in the streaming space. I'm thinking specifically about the emergence of fast channels too, and I know AMC has a lot of those going on. What would you say has changed AMC's business at this time? Can you walk me through perhaps some of the moments when you realized something had to change?
So we have a pretty concerted AVOD fast strategy. We have 15 channels across 7 partners. Those are ad-supported platforms. We're able to monetize those with our advertising partners. And those are full original expressions of the brands where they are. By doing this, again, we're able to, for our partners, bring them along at every single touch point. And for our audiences, we want to make it easy for them on where to find it.
To what extent have you been surprised by the data on AMC and its properties, of course, around subscribers, and how has this data driven investments in new original content to satisfy these audiences?
Our programming strategy is really focused on doubling down on the franchises and audiences that we have. I know I've said that before, but it's shows like the Walking Dead franchise just finale last year. We have 3 spinoff series. We invested in Nan Rice's universe. We have 2 series out from that world, another one coming next year. Orphan Black has its first spinoff series coming. We also look at talent that lives within sort of the AMC brand space as a big sort of programming filter. So taking Better Call Saul, Bob Odenkirk, we just launched Lucky Hank. Giancarlo Esposito has a show Parish coming out next year. We did the Content Room series Cooper's Bar with Ray Seahorn. And we're looking at, how those audiences show up, what characters, actors, genres pop with them. And we use that as sort of the way to develop against them.
One of the things you said just then was very interesting. You talked about how you kind of keep it's a home for certain talent, right? Better Call Saul, you're kind of creating this almost universe in a way. Can I call it universe? But I really think that's a very smart move, because it's it's not one and done. It's then you kind of extending that brand idea into content. That's an interesting strategy.
I don't know that you have to recreate the wheel every time. If you have something that works and you have an audience that keeps coming back, double down on that. Walking Dead for over a decade was the #1 show on cable. We just premiered Dead City on Sunday. It did incredibly well. These audiences still want more from these IPs and talent that they love.
And speaking of, this sort of audience kind of enthusiasm around the show, is we've got to talk about premieres and how that works, because, streaming in lots of ways has redefined the concept of the premiere, right? Could you speak to that a little bit?
We talk a lot about like, what is a premiere? Because a premiere for me is not a premiere for you. And there's linear, which is obviously really important, and you need to drive eyeballs to that tentpole moment. But on streaming, a premiere is when you find the show. I just started watching last week a Discovery Witches on AMC Plus. It's a great show if you like a forbidden creature love. It's amazing. But anyway, I digress. It just premiered for me. That show came out years ago. We're able to now, with advanced targeting, figure out who has seen what, when, and market a lot of these shows as entirely new with, really strategic value proposition campaigns in market, which is exciting. It's kind of a blank canvas every time, even though a show might have peaked 10 years ago.
Do you see the same viewership across, say, a new original piece of content versus like the Witches drama that you just mentioned?
We have a year-long on-ground sort of retention marketing strategy, which includes a lot of those shows, the library content. But there is definitely a more tentpole approach to the big originals because of the linear piece and how important that is for us. But a show like Mayfair Witches, which premiered at the start of the year, is still our number one acquisition driver. And we still have a pretty significant streaming campaign in market around that because viewers are still discovering it. So the same, no, it's different. It sort of is a bit of a roller coaster from a viewing standpoint. And when we see a peak, we try to double down on that.
Is there a pressure on, content-rich platforms such as yours to constantly be kind of producing more and more new scripted dramas? And what does that mean in the context of what's happening now with, the WGA writers' strike? Does that put pressure on a company like yours?
I think it's really, from an acquisition standpoint, it's obviously important to constantly be churning out new content. The writer's strike, from our standpoint, we're in a pretty good place from now through the end of next year. But, it does, for sure, something like that puts pressure on the entire industry because so much is reliant on new content. But, we feel like we're in a pretty good place and our fingers and toes are crossed that this is going to sort of resolve itself soon.
Are there any really big shows that you want to mention coming up that, I know this isn't the upfronts, but it could be a podcast upfront.
Oh my gosh, we have a lot of really good stuff coming up. Telemasca, which is the third installment from the Anne Rice universe, is premiering next year. That franchise is one that is so ripe for creative marketing extensions. We did something really fun. I know this is not the question, but we did something really fun around the launch of Interview with a Vampire in the e-commerce space. We launched a night market, and it was open only during vampire hours, sunset to sunrise. So anything around that franchise where there are genre fans like that gets me really excited from my marketing seat. The other show that I am crazy excited about is Daryl, which is the second show that's coming out of The Walking Dead. I think this is a rip franchise. It's been around for over a decade, but this is the show that has the opportunity to bring in an entire new audience and sort of renew the franchise to new people, get wives to start watching it with their husbands, coworkers to bring their friends along for the first time. So it's a new audience strategy around an old franchise. So that's also another really fun one.
And that's it for the current podcast. Stay tuned because next time we'll be speaking with Susie Watford, the Chief Growth Officer for SiriusXM.
SiriusXM is brilliant at recommending you new music and how you balance that with control and personalization and how you get that mix right. But it's also really interesting, the comparisons with community across the multiple channels and stations that we have. So it's really interesting to think about how we can build on that in order to grow.
The current podcast is produced by Wonder Media Network. Our theme is by Loving Caliber, and the Trade Desk team includes Chris Brooklier and Kat Vesey.
And remember,
we have the largest collection of targeted streaming services in the world. And that's a very different approach to what a lot of these big streaming companies are doing, which is everything for everyone in one place.
I'm Elise.
And I'm Damien.
And we'll see you next time.